Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Gus Heaps with myself, Greg Heaps Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to have a two-part conversation today with our good friend Rocco Miller. He does such great work over at so many different sites. His main one is bracketeer.org, where if you're looking for some scheduling info, he is the man for that. And we're going to talk with him about the fact that some of these SEC teams have not necessarily scheduled the way that many of us would have liked to. They have scheduled some cream puffs, so we will certainly talk about that. We'll also talk about the fact that the SEC has a lot of guys reclassifying from the class of 2027 to 26. We have to talk about these fifth-year guys that are seeking eligibility, which of these guys are actually going to be getting signed, the fact that Cincinnati and Xavier have already benefited from some of these court cases. Does he think that just everyone who's suing right now and is trying to get an extra year of eligibility from the NCAA is going to get it? We're going to talk about that and maybe a few teams that are under the radar that have been improving this offseason as well. So, nice wide-ranging chat with Rocco, one of the best minds in college basketball. We've got some fun today. Really didn't see a lot of news in college basketball on Saturday, but with these court cases, things are coming very hot and heavy, so could be dropping at any minute. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg of you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions because it helps me know what you guys want to all hear on this podcast, how to best be able to get you guys set for what is going to be an incredible college basketball season as well. And the conference previews, they are still rolling on. We should be doing the MEAC within the next week or so. I would anticipate the Missouri Valley Conference as well. I slowed down the last week or two because of all the court decisions that we've got going on and just all the general hoopla that is happening. So that's a big reason why you've been getting a couple fewer of them over the last week or two, but I have no fear. We're going to get you guys all set there, and the goal is to make this the best college basketball season ever, and the way to be able to help do that is by getting on great guests like our good friend Rocco. Again, bracketeer.org, that's where you want to go for all of your scheduling, and additionally, he does great work over at the Field of 68 with their bracketology in season. He does a lot of feature stories for Basket Under Review, that's a Trilly Donovan website, and so much more. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, and then the number 8 all together. And Rocco, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. How are you doing, Greg? What's going on?
What is going on is the fact that we've got a lot of players that are trying to become eligible for this upcoming college basketball season. It's wild out there in our neck of the woods on the West Coast. There's right now the 25 players that are suing in California to try to be able to get some eligibility. We saw the lawsuits in Ohio a few weeks ago. How do you take a look at all these fifth-year guys trying to latch on to rosters? Some guys already have a home because they've been practicing with their respective teams, and some guys might just become free agents.
Well, I think the top players, you probably look at a Keyshawn Hall. We don't know exactly where he would land, but that would be a potential bidding war with all the success he had, both at George Mason and Auburn. You have to imagine there's teams like Texas Tech, possibly LSU, and others that have a few spots available that would pay top dollar for a talent like that. You look at Gonzaga is in a situation where Mario St. Superi just in the last week and a half had a shocking decision to go sign with Villarreal. Well, now that picture is starting to become a little more clear, Greg, because Jorge Sanz, their elite Spanish recruiter and director of operations, who had the tight-knit relationship with Mario, is now going to be joining the North Carolina staff, as announced yesterday. All the pieces are coming together for Gonzaga to go hard after Donovan Dent, who pencils in as the perfect fit at point guard for the Zags. MJ Collins, I think Cincinnati already anticipates one way or another they're going to get him into the fold. What an amazing fit that is to have him continue forward with the Jared Calhoun system, a system he was very proficient in and now can do so at the Big 12 level. And the day we're recording this, Jamichael Stillwell made it official that he intends to sign with Texas Tech, fill in one of those key spots. He's an elite rebounder, has been for several years, proved it in this league last year at UCF. Now can really help this Texas Tech team, especially as they adjust to life early in the season without JT Toppin, and then ideally get Toppin somewhere in the middle of the year. Those all stand out. If Jordan Pope finds his way onto our roster, obviously he's in that Keyshawn Hall category. Sounds like a Duke Brandon, who I liked a lot at both Grand Canyon and Villanova, a really good contributor, great locker room player, player. The Oregon Ducks are in the lead right now for his services. So I imagine all of these top names, the 7 or 8 I just named, plus others, are going to find a home. I know that the NCAA has pushed back here just recently and doubled down on their stance to not allow these guys eligibility. I think that's a recipe for more billable hours. And I think by the time we get to November, these guys are going to have to be able to be allowed to be played. The ones I'm not so sure about are maybe the guys towards the bottom of that list, whether it's like a Casey Abekwe or an Aiden Mahaney or a Javon Porter, Braden Carrington. Some of those guys, like 50-50 chance they find a home. Maybe they just get started early on an overseas career or even going into insurance sales or things of other categories of life. So that will be a little bit more interesting to see. But obviously, I don't think these guys would be spending time in the courtroom and putting their name on a lawsuit if they didn't think they had an opportunity somewhere. A lot of these things happen way before the public knows in terms of coaches reaching out to them and holding a spot for them. So I would take them all pretty legitimately. Corey Stevenson's one that I've got my eye on. I liked him a lot for FIU last year. I thought he was just starting to really click. I think he's got a chance to be an NBA player. Talked to NBA scouts about him when I was down at FIU. That would be a nice sneaky find for even a high major team and not have to probably pay top dollar. And so there's a lot of interesting names. Jackson Kohler, another one. Michigan State, a lot of experience. The list goes on. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yep, and rumor is I have some folks over there in the great state of Wisconsin. Braden Carrington's still practicing with the Wisconsin Badgers because you're always allowed, when you graduate, a few extra practices. They've got one spot open, and he's got his name on that lawsuit. So that makes things very interesting out there. And obviously, a lot of these guys that were a part of the Ohio lawsuit have yet to sign. And the main two guys, you mentioned MJ Collins in passing with Cincinnati, Philip Borovichinen for Xavier. I'm not trying to look at those two teams, but I think that they went from teams that I was feeling solid about. Like, I thought that Xavier was probably going to be an NCAA tournament team. I'm now higher on them. And Cincinnati, for me, went from a team that I thought it might be a little bit of a rough season, number one, but one of just building some chemistry for Cincinnati. Now, all of a sudden, I've got some big expectations for them.
Right. Well, first off, Xavier, I agree. They've definitely got really good pieces. Chance Westry was one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player on UAB a year ago. I think he'll fit in nicely as part of this Richard Pitino offensive system. True Washington, of course, has been a big-time player both at New Mexico and a really solid contributor under the radar at Miami a season ago. You look at Michael Nwoko, who has played in the SEC and averaged in double figures at LSU. This is a pretty loaded roster. Even Ruben Dominguez averaged double figures at Texas A&M. So slotting in a Borovichinen who played under Pitino in the past, this would just really beef them up. I think Xavier projects as close to a top 30 team, really helps the depth in the Big East. It's an opportunity for them to be in the top 4, I think, in the Big East. Marquette's going to be much improved. We know about UConn and St. John's, so that could be your top 4 on paper right now. Would be really interesting. I think when you look over at the Cincinnati Bearcats, I've been high on them regardless of the MJ Collins scenario. This only, emboldens that thinking. I've had an opportunity to help Cincinnati schedule-wise and Utah State in the past, and I've known a lot of these coaches for a long time. Obviously, with a lot of these new parts, you still have a guy in Elamine, who played about 20 minutes a game for Utah State last year. Obviously, he's got the chemistry already a little bit with MJ Collins, should MJ be fully granted the eligibility to play. You also had a couple guys that sat out last year for Utah State, in David Awize and Deshaun Vaden. Now, whether they have prominent roles or not at Cincinnati, this is going to help them continuity-wise and there's a lot of specific nuances to the way they play matchup zone defense in the Jared Calhoun system. And then, of course, offensively, they have a lot of different schematic spacing that takes a lot of repetition. So I think that's going to help them in this transition from Utah State to Cincinnati. You love Tyler Tejada, and this is a loaded enough roster to where Tejada may not even start. He's been an all-star for Towson, seems like, for the last several years, almost 10 years in my book. I've been covering that guy forever. Miles Colvin from Wake Forest and Tylen Riley from Tulsa, just absolute menaces at the guard spots with MJ Collins now potentially in a good enough front line, I think, with Allen Spock backing up probably Hastings in the 5 spot. And so I really, really like the athleticism that the Cincinnati roster has. I think there's a lot of guys that can get up and go. They'll be built to destroy inferior competition. I think they'll have a really high net ranking entering Big 12 play. Won't need to do much more than 9 wins in Big 12, in my opinion, to get to the dance.
Yep, I'm feeling really good about Cincinnati right now. And I know Jared Calhoun is a good coach. I thought that it was going to be a year where maybe there were going to be some ups and downs, but getting MJ Collins in there for me just really pushes them over the top. So I'm feeling great about them. Just like I always feel great when Rocco Miller is aboard. He does such great work over at bracketeer.org, Field of 68, Basket Under Review, so much more. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this is a move that I feel like both of us absolutely love. There might be a lot of people sleeping on this, but Eric Revenot, who I always thought got a little bit of a raw deal over at Portland. He led them to 3 straight 19-plus win seasons. He knows about coaching over at higher academic institutions with being an assistant over at Georgia Tech. He was coaching for Stanford under Kyle Smith, who used to be over at Columbia, so you have some Ivy roots there. He gets hired on by Brown. I want to get your thoughts here, because with Brown, do I think that they're winning the Ivy League or anything like that? No, but Brown was in a very precarious spot. They lose their coach in July, and hiring on Eric Revenot, I think, is the best of a bad situation, and honestly might be a coaching upgrade.
Yeah, we'll see on the upgrade part. Brown a couple of years back was just 2 points away from going to the big dance, which would have been a shocker. They were the last team into the Ivy Madness and then played tremendously well. Of course, the heartbreaking loss to Yale that year. Who knows what happens with Mike Martin anyway if Brown breaks through that year. It's really difficult for the Brown Bears to, outcompete the Yales, the Princetons, even the Harvards and Penns for talent right now. Harvard and Penn have a really good process in place for accumulating talent. And now Brown's battling the Columbias, the Cornells, and the Dartmouths of just trying to stay out of the basement. But I think the Ivy League is just so darn quality, and I think, Mike Martin waiting as long as he did to leave, whether he knew he was going to leave in April or not, really helped Eric Revenot with this upcoming season, because he will be able to work with senior Adrian Uchidunio. And I do think the senior in Luke Paragon will be a good leader. Played 16 minutes off the bench, but obviously has experience. Same with Malcolm Risby Jefferson. So 3 seniors there. Really only Adrian's the one probably penciled in to start. Obviously, Mfamara Dabo is also a senior. So 4 seniors I miscounted there. And I think Ray Cuevas, an interesting transfer coming up from Division III Bowdoin. We have no idea how that translates to the Ivy League. But at Division III Bowdoin, he was a 22.2 points per game guy, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, and over a steal per game at 6'3". Just a dynamic athlete. Obviously, in the Ivy League, it's difficult to get any kind of transfer, but there are a lot of really solid, high academic Division IIIs in the Northeast. So they were able to get Cuevas in the fold. That should help with the depth. And I just don't think it's an empty cupboard for Revenot to start out with. Now, he will probably be picked 7th. I think Dartmouth gets picked 8th, but definitely, there's teams in the top of the league that have shown some cracks of late. Harvard has struggled with their consistency over the last several years. Princeton had a down year last year. Penn rose up last year. Can they sustain that? We'll see. Yale loses a ton of guys. So there's some opportunity. And Columbia is still trying to figure out, the Hovde system is really, really good offensively, but they're still trying to figure out how to defend a little bit. And so Brown, I think, comes in as 7th at Ivy League Media Day, which I will have a vote for. They have a chance to surprise.
Yep, I put them number 7 in my projector finish when I did my Ivy League finish a few weeks ago as well. I still probably have them there because you're really not getting a roster turnover. Call it what it is. Right. It would be just difficult for any of these guys to enter into the transfer portal and get like some sort of an NIL bag or anything like that. But I think that this is a good situation that he's jumping into as well. So I like to see that for Brown, and we always love to see Rocco Miller aboard right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, I think we need to get in some SEC talk because we have seen a lot of their schedules come out over the last week or so. Underwhelming, I think, is the best way to be able to put it. So we'll talk about that. We've got a lot of players reclassifying from the class of 2027 to 2026 as well. So we're going to dive in on that with Rocco, along with a few teams that he's feeling maybe a little bit differently about because of everything that we've been seeing in college basketball over the last few weeks. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peters, and now a part of the Beast of Family podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Gus Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops-Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And it's always a pleasure to be joined by Rocco Miller. He's doing such great work over at Basket Under Review, his main site, bracketeer.org, Field of 68, and so much more. Follow him on the old Twitter/X at Rocco Miller, his first and last name, the number 8 all together. Just such a wealth of knowledge in college basketball. Does a great job covering this sport all 12 months out of the year. And we talked a lot about the court cases and got in a little bit of Brown Bears talk in segment number 1. Now let's take a look at what's all happening out there in the SEC. I do think that going into the season, this is probably going to be the most loaded conference in all of college basketball. You've got Florida back, and you do a lot with scheduling. I've been following up your schedule releases for the SEC teams, and not necessarily impressed, I think is the best way of putting it, with some of these teams. Alabama always plays a great schedule, so shout out to them. They are exempt from this, but Texas A&M, I posted up the GIF where it was like, oh, if you buy 5 cupcakes, you get 1 free. It felt like that was the scheduling for a lot of these teams. And I want to get your thoughts here because it feels like there's a little bit of, shall we say, the football mantra where we've heard a lot of these SEC coaches being like, we don't have to schedule tough out of conference because the SEC is so good in conference. And it feels like that's now bleeding into basketball.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept there. I think everybody does scheduling, based on what they anticipate to have, coming in and basically their philosophy on it. Alabama remains the gold standard in scheduling. They're part of this conference, so I don't want to bash anybody.
They are exempt. Alabama's always exempt.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at their 6 home games, they're going to play Sam Houston, Arkansas State, Oakland, Seton Hall, Kennesaw, and Sanford. There's an opportunity there where they might not even play one quad 4 game once again. Everything else is either road or neutral in big time. They go to Miami, South Florida. They play Houston, St. John's, Iowa on neutrals. And then in Vegas, of course, they'll open with Baylor, probably play Gonzaga on the second day. So Alabama completely loaded, as we've said. Arkansas, still a lot to come together, but they're going to play at least 4 big time games with Carolina, Indiana, Michigan State, Arizona. So no knock on the Hogs at all. Auburn will play in the Players era. They'll go to Clemson. They have Wisconsin and Nashville. So, decent effort after winning the NIT, but obviously did buy about 8 games at home to feel good and sugarcoat the net a little bit. Let's be honest about that. Florida's going to play a hard schedule. And then I think after that, that's where you start to be correct, right? Like Georgia, no shortage. Besides playing Duke in the Jimmy V Classic, good for them for, finding their way in there and going to North Carolina this year. But, they'll play a lot of cupcakes at home. That'll help Georgia beef up their numbers. Kentucky's schedule, well documented, not as tough as anybody in Big Blue Nation would like to see. Getting Louisville at home plus 8 purchased games, really not going to excite a lot of people. LSU definitely did some interesting things, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, they're not playing a road game at all, Greg.
And we don't even know the roster yet.
we don't. Now, LSU fans will be quick to point out that they will play Gonzaga in Spokane Arena. That's basically a road game. And they will play Houston at the NBA arena, which is also basically a road game, but they are playing them not in their campus sites, and everything else is at home besides their MTE. So you could poke a lot of holes in LSU. Ole Miss's schedule is pretty watered down. Same with Mississippi State. Missouri is actually an interesting one. They've gotten a ton of criticism over the years, but shout out to the Tigers this year, Greg, because they did get the home game for the challenge against Pitt, but outside of that, they're going to play a game at Indiana, which Indiana is not returning. So that's really Missouri going out of their way and recognizing, hey, we might be on the bubble and we might need an extra resume game or 2. this is really outside of Dennis Gates' traditional comfort zone. They also did the bold step of playing St. Louis. That will be the start of 3 straight years against the Billikens. How cool is that for that part of the country? That's going to be just an electric environment in the Enterprise Center, and it's on the first Friday night of the season. So major credit to Missouri for that. They maintained their big series with Kansas and Illinois. They went out of their way on a Saturday in December to schedule Nebraska, and they also got a game in Chicago against a much improved Marquette team. So I think those 7 games, we're going to know a lot about Mizzou before SEC starts. So I think Mizzou's the big winner out of a lot of these teams who traditionally go light. Oklahoma went pretty light. South Carolina's going extremely light. Even Tennessee has a nice 9 home games, and so really they have road Purdue in the Players era, and that's pretty mild. Obviously, you've talked about both Texas schools and even Vanderbilt. The one thing I like about Vanderbilt is they will go on 3 true road games. That easily leads the SEC for non-conference, but they go to California. I think they'll be actually favored probably to beat California on the road, and then at Ohio State, they might actually be able to go in there and get a W. And same with at Notre Dame. It looks tougher than it really truly is, because I think Vanderbilt's better than all 3 of those teams. But you even going 2-1 in those 3 road games, I think you tell Mark Byington that right now he would sign up for that. You also get UCF, Memphis, and Wake Forest at home. So if everything's clicking well for this really good Vanderbilt roster led by Tyler Tanner, and getting the great news just recently of Gabe Neesmith, Aaron's younger cousin, reclassifying, this could be a really strong record for Vanderbilt as well entering SEC. And I don't knock them as much for the schedule because, like I said, they're going on the road 3 times.
Yep, they certainly are. And for Vanderbilt, I think that it was huge that Gabe Neesmith reclassified, and lots of guys reclassifying from 27 to 26 out there in the SEC. The opposite of trying to get a 5th year of eligibility, because now you've got these 17-year-olds going up against 23-plus-year-olds. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic, to say the least. And Rocco, we've seen a ton in college basketball over the last few weeks. Typically, like early, mid-July, this is where you just are probably working with teams with scheduling, what have you. There's not a lot of news. There's been a whole lot of news. There's been a whole lot of roster adjustment that has been happening. And is there a team or two that you take a look at right now and you feel differently about them, whether that be to the positive or the negative, with everything that's been happening over the last few weeks?
Some of the 5th-year guys is probably where the interest is falling, especially the ones we're not exactly sure where they're going to land. Obviously, some of those big names we mentioned earlier, starting with Jordan Pope and Keyshawn Hall, are going to really impact a roster. If they end up going to a team that's already going to be very good on paper, or at least a solid enough program, like Stillwell will go to Texas Tech, it's just going to be a rich gets richer situation, and we might be bumping a team from like 18th up to 12th, something like that. So if any of these guys land at a place, Hawaii is a team I'm really interested in, because they started to build their roster out for the coming year while they were going through the Hawaiian state government for $5 million in NIL funds for all Hawaii sports. And the initial court ruling in the state was, declining the state funds going to the school. It got appealed. They went back to court, and just about 4 or 5 weeks ago, if my memory is correct, the $5 million got approved. And so now you look at the Hawaii roster and where they stand today. And it's funny, we always do this stuff on the fly, but right now they've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So they've got at least 2 open scholarships. So like, who's not to say that they go out and get like a big time guy if they have a couple million, maybe they don't want to spend the whole allotment right now, but if they do go get like a Keyshawn Hall or somebody, wouldn't that be a story? And all of a sudden you got to start talking about Hawaii as a Mountain West contender. They've already got a pretty good haul in the portal. You could tell they beefed up their budget, getting Huan Dan from Seattle U, Marcus Adams from Arizona State, Bull Denjdit, who was awesome at UC San Diego, Zach Davidson, who started the year just amazing for Northern Arizona, made a huge splash on our Field of 68 opening day when they should have probably upset Drake in that opening game and then kind of let it go in the last minute. Zach Davidson was a monster in that game, and he ended up having a pretty solid year for the Lumberjacks. And they have Maine Joseph from Davidson, a younger player. He's got a chance to really emerge at Hawaii. And Chance Trujillo, who was by far Utah Tech's best player last year, is going to be their 2 guard. So you just imagine if Hawaii, Tanner Cuff ended up coming back after missing all of last year. He was supposed to be a big time transfer from Evansville 2 years ago. Isaiah Kerr is still there. Hawaii is like an example. There's probably 3 or 4 others that we were just talking about in scheduling, to where, holy cow, they have the money to maybe make a major splash and be a top 4 Mountain West team.
Yep, and I love my late night college basketball games in Hawaii, my friends. So that warms my heart to have you saying that, and I'm very much looking forward to what they're going to be doing. Rocco, you're doing such amazing work looking at this tremendous sport, helping teams out with their schedule, and so much more. So love to get people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Absolutely, Greg. Yeah, if you can believe it, scheduling is still happening. There's lots of teams looking for games on particular dates to wrap things up. Some teams just need 1 or 2 more to go to get it done. A couple others have more to get, 4 or 5 games, if you can believe it. The beat goes on, but a lot of the teams and events I helped with exclusively, we've got to a really good place. That makes me feel good. I don't get as much time in April through July to do a lot of the breakdown. Some of the questions you asked me, I have a big ramp up coming up August and September. So that'll be a big part of my focus, is to get aligned with and more familiar with all these rosters. Obviously, I hear things all the time within these phone calls and, who as a team will be good and who's good offensively and defensively. But getting down into the more nitty gritty of the scheme and the fits and the individuals, always looking forward to that process. So I'll have a couple of pieces in August on Basket Under Review, maybe even 1 or 2 on bracketeer.org. Obviously on bracketeer.org, we have schedule pages coming fast and furious. SEC and Big Ten are there for you to get a contrast and compare. When you asked me that question earlier, I was on our SEC page. Very easy to answer your question. So if you want to practice that at home, feel free to do so on bracketeer.org. The Big 12 will be available this weekend, and we have all the other leagues almost ready to go. So they're going to start coming out at least once a week starting next week. So keep supporting us. We really appreciate that over there on bracketeer.org. The Field of 68 stuff will really ramp up in October. So stay tuned on that.
Yep, and Rocco is doing such an incredible job looking at this great sport of college basketball. He's doing everything he can to get you guys set for the upcoming college basketball season. Just such a wealth of knowledge and such a hard worker. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have 1 of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And please do send those in, because that helps me know a little bit more of what you want to hear for the upcoming college basketball season. We're still working on these conference preview podcasts. The MEAC and the Missouri Valley are going to be up next. I hope to get both of those done within the next 7 to 8 or so days. That'll be my project for the upcoming week. So I certainly am going to be taking a look on that front, because I did want to give a little bit more time for taking a look at these court cases. It certainly is a big piece of news, which typically you don't get in the middle of July here in college basketball. So we had a lot to take a look at there, and we still have a lot to take a look at. We were just discussing it with our good friend here on the podcast today. So be on the lookout for just great interviews in general to get you set for the upcoming college basketball season. Then once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.